I climbed the metal gangway with my duffel bag digging into my shoulder. The Northern Resolve sat heavy in the water, rust streaking down her hull like dried blood. Cargo containers stacked 3 high on deck. Nothing special about her, just another freighter heading north. The captain waited at the top. Patrick Lee, according to my hiring paperwork. 60 years old, maybe more. Gray hair cut military short, the kind of weathered face you get from decades of salt spray and Arctic wind. "Evan Harvey?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Leave your bag there. We need to talk." I dropped the duffel on deck. "Something wrong?" "Not yet." He pulled a laminated card from his jacket, about the size of a playing card, edges worn smooth. "This ship's different from others you've worked." "Different how?" "Read this first, then I'll explain." The card had 5 rules written in black marker, neat block letters, like someone took their time with it. 1. If the ship goes silent, restart the engines immediately. 2. During man overboard calls, do not look at the water. 3. No singing on the ship. 4. When fog appears, stay indoors. 5. Ignore any knocking on the hull. I read it twice. "This a joke?" "No joke." Patrick took the card back, held it between us. Rule 1. If the engines stop, if everything goes quiet, and I mean everything, you run to the engine room. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you run and you restart them. Why would... Just listen. He tapped the second line. Man overboard calls. You'll hear them sometimes. Don't go to the rails. Don't look for anyone in the water. Stay where you are. Eyes forward. I shifted my weight. The gangway creaked behind me. But if someone's overboard, there won't be anyone overboard. His voice stayed flat, matter of fact. Rule 3. No singing, no humming, no whistling. Keep it quiet. Okay. 4. When fog comes in, and it will, you get inside. Bridge, galley, your cabin, doesn't matter. Just get inside and stay there until it clears. The wind picked up, bringing the smell of diesel and salt. I waited. Last one. Patrick held my eyes. You'll hear knocking sometimes, on the hull, below the waterline. Ignore it. Knocking? That's right. From what? Doesn't matter from what. You ignore it. He pocketed the card. These aren't suggestions, Harvey. They're not maritime superstitions or old sailor tales. Follow them and you'll make it home. Break them. He shrugged. You're serious. Dead serious. He turned toward the bridge. Grab your bag. I'll show you to your cabin. I picked up my duffel and followed him through a heavy steel door. The passageway smelled like oil and old paint. Our footsteps echoed on metal grating. How long have you been captain here? I asked. 12 years. And these rules, they've always been in place, since before my time. He stopped at a door marked Crew Quarters 3. This is you. Dinner's at 6. Liam will show you around after. Liam? First mate. Good man. Follows the rules. He started to leave, then turned back. One more thing. Some of the crew might test you. See if you'll break the rules. Don't. The cabin was small but clean. Single bunk, metal desk, porthole looking out at the dock. I tossed my bag on the bed and sat down. The rules made no sense. Restart engines that shouldn't stop. Don't look for drowning people. Don't sing. Hide from fog. Ignore knocking. But Patrick hadn't smiled once, hadn't winked or given any sign he was messing with the new guy. And 12 years was a long time to keep up a prank. I unpacked my clothes into the narrow locker. Work shirts, thermal underwear, 2 pairs of boots. Same gear I'd brought on every other ship. But this wasn't like the others, apparently. At 6, I found the galley. 3 men sat around a metal table, plates of spaghetti in front of them. They looked up when I entered. You're Harvey. The speaker was short and muscular, black hair pulled back in a ponytail. I'm Liam Burke, first mate. Evan, that's Sammy. He pointed to a heavy man in coveralls. Engineer, and Declan does the cooking. Declan waved from the stove, tall guy with a gray beard and shaved head. Grab a plate. I loaded up with spaghetti and garlic bread, joined them at the table. Normal dinner conversation, weather reports, cargo manifests, maintenance schedules. Nobody mentioned rules or warnings. After dinner, Liam showed me around. Engine room, bridge, cargo holds. Standard layout for a vessel this size. He explained my duties: secure cargo, maintain deck equipment, stand watch, regular deckhand work. Patrick show you the card? He asked as we climbed back to the main deck. Yeah. Good, follow it. You ever break any of them? He stopped walking. No, but you've been tempted. Once, few years back, heard the knocking during a night watch. Loud, insistent, like someone trapped. He started walking again, but I followed Rule 5. What do you think it is? The knocking. I think it doesn't matter what I think. Rules say ignore it, so I ignore it. The first week passed quiet. I settled into the routine. 4-hour watches, maintenance work, meals with the crew. The Northern Resolve pushed north through gray water, following the inside passage between islands and mainland. I almost forgot about the rules. Almost started thinking Patrick had been testing me after all. Ships were full of traditions and superstitions. Maybe this was just another version. Then day 8 came. I was on deck, late afternoon, securing cargo lines. The weather had turned, wind gusting, waves breaking over the bow. I worked my way between containers, checking tension, adjusting as needed. The ship went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The engines stopped. The wind died. The waves flattened. Even the creaking of metal against metal ceased, like someone had muted the world. My hands froze on the cargo line. The sudden absence of sound pressed against my eardrums. I could hear my heartbeat, my breathing, nothing else. Rule 1 slammed into my head. If the ship goes silent, restart the engines immediately. I dropped the line and ran. My boots rang against the deck, the only sound in the vacuum. I yanked open the door to the interior, took the stairs 3 at a time. The engine room was 2 decks down, aft section. I'd walked it with Liam, remembered the route. The silence followed me through the passages. No ventilation hum, no distant voices, no machinery. Just my footsteps and panicked breathing. I burst through the engine room door. Sammy was already there, hands flying over the control panel. Sweat poured down his face. Come on, he muttered, flipping switches, checking gauges. Start, damn you. What happened? Don't know. Everything just stopped. He pulled a red lever. Nothing. Help me with the manual override. He pointed to a panel on the far wall. I ran over, found the override switches, 3 of them, protected by plastic covers. On my count, Sammy called. 3, 2, 1. We flipped them together. For a second, nothing. Then a low rumble built from below. The engines coughed, sputtered, roared to life. The familiar vibration returned to the deck plates. Sammy slumped against the control panel. Jesus! This happened before? Twice since I've been aboard. No warning, no reason, just... He made a cutting motion with his hand. How long were they off? Maybe 30 seconds. Felt longer. He wiped his forehead with his sleeve. You did good getting down here fast. Patrick made the rules pretty clear. Yeah, well, clear's one thing, believing's another. He checked the gauges again, making sure everything held steady. First time it happened, I thought we'd lost power. Tried to diagnose the problem instead of just restarting. Took almost 2 minutes. What happened? His face went pale. Things I don't want to remember. I waited, but he didn't elaborate. The engine room filled with its normal sounds, pumps cycling, generators humming, cooling fans spinning. After the silence, it felt like a symphony. We good now? I asked. For now. Sammy pulled a rag from his pocket, wiped his hands. But stay sharp. Sometimes they go quiet more than once in a day. I headed back topside, legs shaky from the adrenaline dump. The wind had returned, the waves, all the normal sounds of a ship at sea. But I couldn't shake the memory of that silence. Complete, unnatural, wrong. I found my cargo line where I'd dropped it, finished securing it, moved to the next. Tried to focus on the work, not think about engines that stopped for no reason or what Sammy didn't want to remember. The sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the water orange and red. Beautiful, if you could forget that something out here made the world go silent. I tied off the last line and headed inside. Tomorrow would bring another day of rules and warnings and things that didn't make sense. But I'd followed Rule 1. That had to count for something. 2 days later, I was eating lunch in the galley when it happened. Evan was at the sink, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing the breakfast pots. Declan had made his famous hash browns that morning, which meant the pans were a nightmare of stuck-on potato. I'd just taken a bite of my sandwich when Declan's voice crackled over the intercom. Man overboard, port side, man overboard, port side. Evan dropped the pot he was washing. It clanged into the sink as he spun around, water dripping from his hands. Go, I said, already moving. Life rings are in the red boxes on deck. He was out the door before I finished talking. I followed, but my knees aren't what they used to be. By the time I reached the deck, Evan had already grabbed a life preserver and was rushing toward the port rail where Liam stood. Liam had 2 rings out already, holding the ropes tight. He must have been close when the call came in. I watched Evan lean toward the rail, starting to look down at the water. "Don't look!" Liam's voice cut sharp across the deck. "Throw it blind and step back." Evan jerked back like he'd been slapped. He hefted the orange ring and tossed it over the side without looking, then took 3 quick steps away from the rail. I could hear it now, splashing from below. Rhythmic, desperate, someone fighting to stay afloat. My hands itched to help, to look over and see who it was, but I kept my eyes on the horizon. Liam worked the ropes, playing them out smooth and steady. He'd done this before. We all had. "How do we know if they grab it?" Evan asked. His voice sounded strained. "We don't," Liam said. "We throw the rings and wait." The splashing continued. Evan shifted his weight, hands clenching and unclenching. I knew that feeling, the urge to look, to help, to do something more than stand there blind. "Rule 2, I reminded him quietly. "No matter what you hear." He nodded, jaw tight. We stood there for 10 minutes, 10 long minutes of splashing and silence, throwing rings we couldn't aim, hoping they found their mark. Then Patrick's voice came over the intercom. "Emergency has passed. All hands return to stations." The splashing stopped. Liam began hauling in the lines. The rings came back empty, dripping seawater onto the deck. "Did we?" Evan started to ask. "Don't," Liam said. "We follow the rules. That's all." Evan looked between us, confusion clear on his face. "But someone fell overboard. Shouldn't we?" "No," I said firmly. "We shouldn't. Come on. Those pots won't wash themselves." I guided him back toward the galley. Behind us, Liam continued pulling in the empty rings, coiling the ropes with practiced efficiency. In the galley, Evan picked up the pot he'd dropped, staring at it like he'd forgotten what it was for. "Who fell?" he asked quietly. "Don't know." I sat back down at my table, picked up my sandwich. Never do. But the crew's all accounted for. I saw everyone this morning. I took a bite, chewed slowly. Best not to think about it too hard. He turned the pot over in his hands. "This is insane." "Yeah," I agreed. "But it's the job. You follow the rules, you go home safe. You start asking questions, looking when you shouldn't." I shrugged. "Well, I've been here 8 years. Plan to make it 8 more." Evan went back to washing dishes, movements mechanical. I finished my lunch in silence, listening to the scrape of the scrub brush against metal. Neither of us mentioned that we'd never found out if anyone had actually fallen or been rescued. Some questions you learn not to ask. The next week passed quiet. Normal watches, normal meals, normal maintenance. Evan settled into the routine, though I caught him glancing at the water sometimes, probably still thinking about the man overboard call. I was in the engine room checking fluid levels when the intercom crackled. Patrick's voice, urgent. "All hands inside immediately. Fog coming in. All hands inside now." I dropped my dipstick and moved. You don't hesitate when Patrick uses that tone. I reached the main deck just as Evan came around from the bow. He had a bucket and mop in hand, probably been swabbing the forward deck. Behind him I saw it, a wall of gray rolling toward us from the starboard side. "Move!" I shouted. He looked back, saw the fog, and ran. We both hit the door to the crew quarters at the same time. I yanked it open and we tumbled inside, Evan dropping the bucket in his rush. It clattered down the corridor as I slammed the door shut behind us. Through the porthole, I watched the fog reach the ship. It didn't drift or flow like normal fog. It pressed against the hull, thick and deliberate. Where it touched the glass, it pulsed, darker, then lighter, like something breathing. Evan stood next to me, staring out. "Is that normal fog?" "No." I stepped back from the porthole. "And don't watch it too long." But he kept looking. I understood. First time you see it, you can't help yourself. The fog moved wrong. It pushed against the wind, creeping along the deck like it was searching for something. Where it touched the portholes, it left patterns that looked almost like fingerprints. "It's moving against the wind," Evan said. Yeah, fog doesn't do that. This fog does. I moved to my bunk, sat down. Best to just wait it out. Usually passes in an hour or two. Evan finally pulled himself away from the porthole. What happens if you're caught outside in it? I looked at him steady. Nobody's ever come back to tell us. That shut him up. He found a seat on Liam's bunk, hands clasped between his knees. Outside, the fog pressed thicker against the glass. The room grew dim, like twilight had fallen sudden and wrong. First week you dealt with the engines, I said, trying to distract him. Then the man overboard. Now this. You're getting the full tour. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Lucky me. The fog pulsed darker. In the dim light, I could see Evan's hands shaking slightly. First time hits everyone hard. Tell you what, I said, let me show you something. I reached under my bunk and pulled out a deck of cards. You play poker? A little. Good. Helps pass the time. I started shuffling. Declan usually joins when he's not cooking. Liam too, if he's not on watch. We played a few hands. 5-card draw. Nothing fancy. The familiar snap of cards and clink of the penny antipot we kept helped settle the nerves. Every so often, Evan's eyes would drift to the porthole where the fog pressed and pulsed, but he'd catch himself and look back at his cards. 2 pairs, he said, laying down his hand. Jacks and 5s. 3 7s. I scooped the pot. Deal you in again? He nodded, and I shuffled. Outside, the fog had gone so thick we couldn't see past the glass. The porthole looked like someone had painted it gray from the outside, gray that moved and breathed. Sammy, Evan said quietly. The other rules. Have you seen them all broken? I dealt the cards slow, thinking. Seen enough. Singing brings attention. Things you don't want paying attention to you. And the knocking. I shook my head. The knocking's the worst, because it sounds so human, so desperate. But it's not human. If it is, it's been knocking for 12 years straight. You tell me what could do that. He picked up his cards, arranged them carefully. The fog pulsed darker, lighter, darker again, like a heartbeat made of gray. How do you stand it? He asked. Living with all this? I looked at my own hand. Pair of queens. Same way you do any job. Show up, follow the rules, collect your paycheck. The money's good, and most days are just normal sailing. Most days. Most days, I agreed. Look, kid, every job has its hazards. Construction workers deal with falls. Miners deal with cave-ins. We deal with this. I gestured toward the porthole. Long as you follow the rules, you'll be fine. He nodded slowly. We played out the hand in silence. I won again with 3 queens. After an hour, the fog started to thin. It pulled back from the portholes like fingers slowly uncurling, leaving those strange patterns on the glass that faded as we watched. Within minutes, it had rolled away completely, moving against the wind just like it had arrived. Bright afternoon sunlight flooded back through the porthole. The whole thing might have been a dream, except for the bucket Evan had dropped, still lying in the corridor. All clear. Patrick's voice came over the intercom. Resume normal duties. Evan stood up, stretched. Thanks for the distraction. Anytime. I tucked the cards back under my bunk. Oh, and Evan, next time you see it coming, don't wait to look at it. Just get inside. The fog's patient, but it's not friendly. He nodded and headed for the door, probably going back to finish swabbing the deck. I stayed sitting for a moment, looking out the porthole at the clear blue sky. 8 years I'd been doing this. 8 years of following the rules, not asking questions, playing cards through the strange times. I'd make it 8 more if I kept my head down. But something about this kid made me wonder. He'd handled everything we'd thrown at him so far. The engines, the man overboard, now the fog. He followed the rules but kept asking questions, kept trying to understand. That curiosity would either make him one of the best crew we'd had, or it would get him killed. I hoped it would be the first one. We needed more good people on this ship. I stood up and headed back to the engine room. The engines needed their levels checked. Fog or no fog, that was the job. You show up, you follow the rules, you go home safe. Simple as that. I sat in the crew quarters for 3 hours waiting. The metal walls creaked every now and then, normal ship sounds that made me jump after what had happened. Sammy dealt cards for another game, but I couldn't focus. Liam cleaned his boots. Nobody talked much. When Patrick's voice finally came over the intercom, all clear, fog has passed, I was the first one out the door. The deck looked wrong. That's what hit me first. Everything was bone dry. Not a drop of moisture anywhere, which made no sense. Fog that thick should have left everything dripping. I ran my hand along the rail, completely dry. Then I saw the scratches. They covered the metal surfaces near the crew door. Long gouges, maybe 8 inches each, running parallel like something with claws had tried to get in. The paint was scraped away down to bare metal. Fresh scratches. The exposed steel hadn't started rusting yet. I walked the length of the deck, checking. More scratches on the cargo hatches, on the bridge windows, on every door, all at about chest height, all fresh. The life ring boxes had scratches too. One of the rings hung half out of its holder like something had tried to pull it free. I pushed it back into place and secured the latch. I found Liam near the bow inspecting similar marks on the anchor housing. "These weren't here before," I said. He glanced at the scratches and kept walking. "Best not to think about it. But what could?" I said, "Don't think about it." He headed inside without looking back. I stayed on deck another hour, cataloging the damage. The scratches followed a pattern. They started at the waterline. I could see fresh gouges in the paint down there and worked their way up. Whatever made them had climbed. The highest marks were near the bridge, a good 30 feet above the water. 2 weeks passed. Normal routine, normal work. The scratches started to rust, but nobody painted over them. I learned not to ask. Then came my first solo night watch. The wheelhouse was quiet except for the engine hum and the hiss of the radio. 2 in the morning, middle of my 4-hour shift. Calm seas, clear night. I was checking our heading when I heard it. 3 knocks against the hull, metal on metal, hollow and deliberate. I froze. The sound came from port side below the waterline. I waited. 3 more knocks. Same rhythm, same force. Rule 5 burned in my mind. When you hear knocking on the hull, don't acknowledge it. Don't look, don't respond. I gripped the wheel and stared straight ahead at the dark horizon. The autopilot was engaged, but I held on anyway, knuckles white. The knocking moved, started near the bow, worked its way aft. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Like someone walking alongside the ship underwater, keeping pace. The sound stayed perfectly level with our speed, 8 knots through calm water. I wanted to look. God, I wanted to look. Just lean out the bridge window and see what was down there. My hands shook on the wheel. The knocking reached midship, 3 knocks, right below where I stood. The sound reverberated through the deck plates. Then it continued aft, steady and patient. 20 minutes. That's how long it lasted. The knocking made 3 complete circuits of the ship, bow to stern and back again. Always the same pattern, always the same height below the waterline. When it finally stopped, I was sweating through my shirt. My hands had cramped from gripping the wheel. I stayed frozen another 10 minutes before I trusted myself to move. Liam relieved me at 4. He took one look at my face and nodded. "You heard it." 20 minutes, I managed. That's a long one. Usually it's 5, maybe 10. He checked the instruments. "You did good. Didn't look." "No. Good man." He settled into the captain's chair. "Get some sleep." I didn't sleep. I lay in my bunk thinking about those knocks, thinking about something pacing us underwater in the middle of the ocean, hundreds of miles from shore. The knocking came back the next night, and the next, always during the late watch, always the same pattern. I got used to it in a way, started timing it, counting the circuits. It became part of the routine. Check heading, monitor radar, ignore the thing trying to get our attention from below. A week after the knocking started, I was eating dinner in the galley. Declan had made beef stew, humming while he served it up. Some old song I recognized but couldn't name. The rhythm was catchy. Without thinking, I started singing along. Quiet, just under my breath. "Brandy, you're a fine girl. What a good wife you would be." The galley door slammed open so hard it bounced off the wall. Patrick stood there, face white as paper. "Everyone to quarters, now." Declan dropped his ladle. It clattered on the metal floor. "Captain, I was just... now!" We ran. All of us, even Sammy with his bad knees. Patrick herded us into the crew quarters and slammed the door behind us. His hands shook as he spun the wheel lock. "What did I do?" I asked. Patrick turned on me. "Rule 3, no singing on the ship." I barely... Doesn't matter, they heard. Before I could ask who they were, the sound started. clicking, like fingernails on glass but sharper. It came from outside the porthole, quick and frantic, then chittering, high-pitched, almost like laughter but wrong. The sounds multiplied, first one source, then three, then dozens. Something scraped along the outer hull. The clicking intensified, surrounding us. Through the porthole, I caught glimpses of movement, dark shapes flitting past too fast to focus on. Declan sat on his bunk with his head in his hands. I'm so sorry, I forgot I was humming." "Not your fault," Patrick said, but his voice was tight. "Everyone stay quiet. Don't go near the portholes." The chittering grew louder. Whatever was out there started testing the door. The handle rattled. Something scraped at the seals, probing for weakness. I pressed myself against the far wall. The sounds were everywhere now, above us, beside us, scratching at every possible entry point. The porthole glass creaked under pressure. Sammy pulled out his cards. His hands trembled as he shuffled. "Anyone want to play?" We played poker by the overhead light while things circled our ship. The chittering never stopped. Sometimes it sounded almost like words, like they were trying to mimic speech. Other times it was pure animal noise, hungry and eager. 3 hours. That's how long they stayed. The sounds would fade for a moment and we'd think it was over. Then they'd surge back worse than before. Once, something hit the door hard enough to make the whole wall shake. When dawn finally came, the sounds retreated. Not all at once. They pulled back gradually, chittering fading to clicks, clicks fading to silence. We waited another hour before Patrick unlocked the door. The deck was covered in scratches, worse than after the fog. These marks were different, smaller, more frantic. They covered every surface in overlapping patterns like something had been trying to claw through solid steel. Patrick found me after breakfast. I was scrubbing the deck, trying to clean off some kind of residue the things had left behind. Sticky and black, like tar, but thinner. "Evan." He waited until I looked up. "Never sing on this ship again." "I won't. I'm sorry, I know you didn't mean to. That's why I'm only warning you once." He studied the scratches on the deck. "They remember songs. Once they hear one from a ship, they follow it, sometimes for years." "What are they?" He shook his head. "Doesn't matter what they are. What matters is they come when you sing, and they're hungry." He walked away, then stopped. "That residue you're cleaning, don't get it on your skin." I switched to the long-handled brush. The rest of that week blurred together. The ship went silent twice more. Both times I ran to the engine room, found Sammy already at the controls. We had the restart sequence down to 15 seconds. Flip switches, prime pumps, hold breath until the engines caught. Fog approached 3 times. Once during my watch, I saw it coming and called the alert myself. Everyone made it inside. We played cards while it pressed against the portholes, leaving those strange prints that looked almost like hands. The knocking became a nightly visitor, always during the late watch, always the same pattern. I stopped timing it, stopped counting circuits, just held the wheel and stared ahead until it went away. On our last day before port, Patrick called me to his cabin. I'd never been inside before. Charts covered one wall. The desk was clean except for a logbook and that laminated card with the 5 rules. "Sit," he said. I took the chair across from his desk. He poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that looked older than the ship. "You did well," he said. "Followed every rule, even when you didn't understand, even when you were curious. Thank you, sir." He sipped his coffee. Most green crew, they last maybe 3 days before they break a rule. Think they know better. Think the rules are just stories. He tapped the laminated card. "You never questioned them." Seemed like a bad idea. "Smart." He leaned back. "You want to know why these rules exist?" I nodded. "Ships disappear out here, not sink, disappear. Coast Guard finds nothing. No debris, no oil slick, no emergency beacon. Just gone." He pulled out a folder, showed me newspaper clippings. Missing vessel reports going back decades. Every one of them stopped following rules. Got comfortable. Got careless. He showed me a photo of a cargo ship like ours. This was my first command. The Steady Progress. Good ship. Good crew. 3rd year out, my engineer thought the engine shutdowns were just mechanical failure. Spent 5 minutes trying to diagnose the problem instead of restarting immediately. He put the photo away. We found pieces of him in 3 different cargo holds. My coffee went cold in my hands. "The rules keep us alive," Patrick continued. "Long as we follow them, we're just another ship passing through. Break them." He shrugged. Things out here are always watching, always waiting for an invitation. Why tell me this now? Because you've proven you can follow orders without explanations. That makes you valuable crew. He refilled his cup. Also because we dock tomorrow, and you need to decide if you're coming back out with us. I thought about the scratches on the deck, the knocking in the night, the fog that moved against the wind. When do you leave port? 3 days. Same crew if they all sign on again. He studied me. The pay's good because the work is dangerous. But if you follow the rules, you'll be fine. 12 years I've been captain. Never lost a man who followed the rules. I finished my cold coffee. I'll think about it. Fair enough. He stood. We reached port at dawn. Get your gear ready. I headed for the door, then turned back. Captain, the things we don't look at, the things we don't acknowledge. What happens if we do? His face went hard. Then you become one of them, and the next crew hears you knocking. The Northern Resolve docked at the port of Anchorage the next morning. I walked down the gangway with my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, each step taking me further from the ship and back toward what most people called normal life. The metal groaned under my boots, same sound it made when I'd first climbed aboard a month ago. Only now I knew what those groans meant. Now I knew what listened to them. The laminated rule card sat in my wallet, pressed between my driver's license and a $20 bill. I'd thought about throwing it away, thought about leaving it in my cabin. But my hand had moved on its own when I packed, sliding it into the leather fold like it belonged there, like maybe I'd need those rules again someday. The dock stretched out ahead of me, concrete and steel under a gray Alaska morning. Forklifts already buzzed around the cargo area, their beeping and rumbling mixing with the shouts of dock workers. Normal sounds, safe sounds, nothing like the silence that could swallow a ship whole, or the clicking of things that remembered songs, or knocking that never stopped asking to come in. I found a spot near the harbor master's office and dropped my bag. From there I could see the whole operation, the Northern Resolve tied up at her berth, cargo doors open, crew moving with practiced efficiency. Containers swung from the ship's cranes, guided by workers who probably went home every night to warm beds and never thought twice about what might be watching from the water. Sammy appeared on deck, his coveralls already stained with engine grease. Even from 50 yards away I could see him directing the crane operator, one hand raised, fingers spread. The container settled onto the dock with a metallic thud. He turned and caught sight of me, raised his other hand in a brief wave. I waved back. The ocean stretched out beyond the breakwater, flat and gray under low clouds. I'd grown up in Ohio, never saw the ocean until I was 25. Used to think it was beautiful, peaceful even. Now I watched those waters and wondered what watched back. Wondered how many ships had vanished out there, not sunk but taken, because someone looked when they should have turned away, or sang when they should have stayed quiet, or opened a door when something knocked. A month ago, I would have called myself crazy for thinking like that. A month ago, I would have laughed at Patrick's rules, figured they were hazing the new guy or keeping up some old maritime tradition. But I'd felt the ship go silent. I'd heard the splashing during man overboard calls when everyone was accounted for. I'd seen the fog move against the wind and leave those fingerprint patterns on the glass. I'd listened to knocking circle the hull for 20 minutes straight, 3 taps at a time, patient and persistent. I pulled out my wallet and touched the edge of the card through the leather. 5 simple rules that made no logical sense but had kept the Northern Resolve sailing for 12 years under Patrick's command. How many other ships had similar rules? How many captains passed down warnings that sounded like superstition but were really survival instructions? Declan emerged from the galley door, garbage bags in both hands. He walked to the dumpster near the dock's edge, tossed them in, then headed back without looking at the water. Even here, safely tied to the dock, he kept his eyes away from the edge. Old habits, smart habits. I thought about my apartment back in Seattle, 2 rooms, 500 square feet, rent due in 3 weeks. I'd left it thinking I'd be gone a month, maybe 2. Just long enough to save up some money, get back on my feet after the warehouse closed. Now the idea of going back there, of pretending the last month hadn't happened, felt impossible. How could I work some normal job knowing what I knew? How could I sleep in a bed that didn't rock with the waves, in a room where silence meant peace instead of danger? The Northern Resolve looked different in the morning light, smaller somehow, more ordinary, just another cargo ship among dozens in the port, nothing special about her gray hull or her practical lines. But I knew her decks. I knew the engine room where Sammy and I had fought to restart dead motors. I knew the bridge where I'd gripped the wheel and refused to look while something knocked 30 feet below. I knew the crew quarters where we'd huddled while fog pressed against the portholes and creatures drawn by Declan's humming tested our doors. Patrick appeared at the top of the gangway, clipboard in hand. He spoke to one of the longshoremen, pointed at something on his papers, then glanced my way. Our eyes met across the distance. He nodded once, not a greeting exactly, more like acknowledgement, recognition. I'd followed his rules, survived my first voyage, and he knew I understood now what that meant. I nodded back. Yeah, I understood. Understood that the ocean held more than fish and waves. Understood that some knowledge came with a price, and once you had it, you couldn't give it back. Understood that the Northern Resolve and her rules were the only thing standing between her crew and whatever haunted those waters. Patrick turned and walked back toward the bridge, probably had paperwork to file, customs forms to complete. Normal captain stuff that didn't involve laminated warnings or creatures that climbed hulls or engines that stopped for no mechanical reason. But even those mundane tasks were part of keeping the ship sailing, keeping the crew alive, keeping the rules intact for the next voyage. Liam came down the gangway, sea bag over his shoulder. He passed me without stopping, just a quick Evan and a nod, off to wherever he spent his time between voyages. Did he have family? Friends who asked about his work? What did he tell them? Sure, the job's fine, except sometimes we throw life preservers to things that aren't human and lock ourselves inside when the fog thinks. The morning wore on. More crew left, more cargo came off. The Northern Resolve slowly emptied herself of both. I stayed on my spot by the harbor master's office, watching it all happen, trying to make sense of what I'd experienced. But maybe that was the wrong approach. Maybe some things didn't make sense. Maybe they just were, and you either accepted them or you didn't. And acceptance was the price of survival. A week later, I stood in the shipping company's office, pen in hand. The contract lay on the desk in front of me. Standard employment agreement, same terms as before. 3 months this time, departing in 3 days. Same crew if they all signed on. The secretary waited patiently while I read through the familiar paragraphs about wages and duties and company policies that didn't mention anything about supernatural dangers or impossible rules. My wallet sat open beside the papers. The laminated card peeked out between the bills, its edges already softening from being handled. 5 rules that had kept me breathing when logic said I should be dead or worse. I signed my name on the line. The pen moved smooth across the paper, committing me to another voyage on the Northern Resolve. Another 3 months of watching for fog that moved wrong, of restarting engines that had no reason to stop, of ignoring sounds that wanted acknowledgement more than anything in the world. The secretary took the contract, smiled, told me to report to the ship at 0600 on departure day. I thanked her and left, walking back out into the anchorage afternoon. The clouds had lifted some, showing patches of blue between the gray. Normal sky. Normal day. Normal world that didn't know about the things that knocked on hulls or climbed ships in the dark. But I knew, and knowing meant I couldn't pretend otherwise. The Northern Resolve would sail again in 3 days, and I'd be on her, following Patrick's rules without question, because now I understood what he'd meant in his cabin that last day. The rules weren't just about keeping us alive. They were about keeping us human, about making sure that when something knocked, we stayed on our side of the hull, no matter how much we wanted to answer. I touched my wallet where the card rested. 3 days. Then back to sea, back to the rules, back to the constant vigilance that kept the Northern Resolve sailing while other ships simply vanished. I'd board again with the same determination I'd carried that first month. Follow every rule. Don't ask why. Don't look when told not to. Don't sing. Don't go outside in the fog. Don't answer the knocking. Simple rules that made the difference between coming home and becoming one of the things that knocked.